Welcome to Mistress Proletariat's very first video essay. The thesis: transracial adoption is child abuse. Okay, let's try this again. Mixed race children with white mothers is child abuse. The thesis: the foster care system is child abuse. Fuck, I keep doing more research and I can't figure out what the thesis is. Alright, take 6. Narcissistic mothers cause child abuse. No, it's not quite covering all of it either. I got it. The thesis: raising children in capitalism is child abuse. I hope that you guys are all warmed up because we are going to be not going in very gentle in this one. Trigger warning: racism, narcissistic abuse, child abuse, sexual assault, discussion of childhood trauma, white women. Specific trigger warning to Black people who were raised by white parents. Please seek community-centered counseling or email me at disruptivebodies@gmail.com and schedule a chat. I will make time to discuss this topic or my experience in a Zoom call. Extra trigger warning: all footage, clips, and examples used in this video do not represent the feelings or intention of that subject and are only being referenced for educational purposes. When I speak of Black people in this video, that can be interchangeable with all colonized peoples or people of color. I am Black, so I will be speaking from my perspective and framework. If you are a white parent of Black children and processing racism during this time, please consider diving deeper and creating opportunities for your Black children to experience their culture. Now, if you could please put your mind into a completely open position, pour your glass of wine, light your blunt. The entertainment, comedy, and education and triggering will begin shortly. Thank you all for joining me on this journey about capitalism and parenting. No, seriously, I know I put a trigger warning in the beginning of this video, but I'm going to add an extra trigger warning right now because I done triggered myself so many times doing research and doing this fucking video essay. Warning, no matter your identity, there's a chance that something in this video may trigger you.
Good morning, Kyra. How are you?
Good, good, good. Hey, let's talk about this interview, right? Because we've seen so many beautiful multicultural families grow through adoption. I mean, the latest number, right, is 40% of adoptive children are of a different race than their adopted parents. It's such a blessing.
As a dark-skinned Black girl raised in America by white parents in a 98% white community in the suburbs of North Seattle, understanding my true identity and my true self has not just been a journey, it's been a battle. I was trapped in a situation that was out of my control, being raised by white parents who had their own trauma and issues outside of their racial biases and outright racism. And then when I was finally able to break free of my 18-year prison and I tried to find the promised land of my community and culture, I was unfortunately met with things like this. Why do you talk like that? You think you're better than us? Why do you dance like a white girl? Ew, you slept with white men? Why is your hair so messy it looks like a white girl? Why the fuck would we call the cops? I mean, you're invited, but you can't bring any of your white girlfriends. You're so lucky you didn't have to grow up in the hood. Oh, you might not get it. You're not quite Black enough. As I navigated Black spaces as an adult, and especially in the last 5 to 8 years of my life, and especially within activism and liberation communities, I've noticed that not much space is given to this topic. Unfortunately, I think this is to our own detriment as a Black community in our liberation movement. In Black community spaces, we continue to not hold space or talk about Black people's experiences who were raised in the colonizer's home, which unfortunately further alienates us from our own identity, whether we are mixed or whether we were adopted or grew up in foster care. Even with the most emotionally decolonized, mature, and healthy white parents, Black children are going to suffer trauma. If we agree about the underlying principle that all white people are holding racial biases because of a systemically racist system, and that system being the US state apparatus as an abstract entity or control mechanism, then we have to take that into context when we are talking about white parents who have children of color. I believe that these family structures generally just reinforce the power structures and systematic oppression that the US state and America as a whole is still suffering from. Not that I found in my research that many white parents do much research or diversity training before they adopt or raise Black children. There is no amount of training or classes or friends that are Black that you can have that can prepare you with the proper tools that you need to raise Black children in America. And I want to say this under the context that I don't really believe in the current social and political structure that we have, given it is capitalism and individualism. I don't think there's any healthy environment that we can raise any children, no matter the race, in, particularly when it comes to children of color. I genuinely believe that there are very rare situations in which those children are not going to experience another level of trauma. I also believe when it comes to effective liberation strategies and intersectional healing, the oversight and exclusion of Black people who have experiences of being raised by white parents has created a blind spot in our psychological analysis of systematic racism and covert ways that colonizers continue to reinforce the system and the hierarchical structures. I think oftentimes in Black spaces, other Black people who grew up in Black households forget that none of us got to choose what household we grew up in as a child. But this video really isn't about chastising the Black community. Love, okay? This video is talking about white parents and particularly narcissistic white mothers. Alright, this is going to continue to get serious, but let's go ahead and do a wardrobe change so we can try to keep it a little bit fun. Did I do the bisexual lighting good? I mean, I'm queer, I'm pansexual, I like all humans, I don't really care what body you come in, but like, what do y'all think? Did I do it? Do you like it? Although we will be covering white fathers, the parenting relationship between white parents and Black boys, in this video we will be focusing on the racist white mother archetypes that show up in these family dynamics. I want to add that there is some nuance in the dichotomy between the relationship of Black boys with white parents versus the relationship with Black girls and white parents. The nuance and intersection just gets even deeper when we start talking about gender expression or being queer or non-binary or transgender. Adultification dehumanizes Black girls and boys' bodies at young ages, making it easier on all communities to start fetishizing them and seeing their bodies as a commodity. Since my experience in this world has been as a cis woman who identifies as being non-binary and queer, I would highly suggest that you go check out FD Signifier's video about the commodification of Black male athletes if you'd like to dive deeper in on this topic.
Me, I was really good at Tekken. I've never been too competitive, which is good because I've also never been all that athletic. But you wouldn't be able to tell from how I look. In fact, especially when I was younger and less flabby, you'd have sworn I was a good athlete, to the point where I remember vividly when I was the same age of my son, only 8, that I would have adult men approach me and ask me if I played football or wanted to play for their little league team. They would say things like, "You got the body of a football player," which I didn't understand much then. I understand better now, but then and now it was a little weird, little weird. I think it akin to how a lot of girls feel when they start getting older and people start looking at their bodies in a sexualized fashion. It's that first moment where, as a child, you recognize that your body is something else to other people and you have no control or say in that. It's that first feeling of being objectified, and it's something that we don't talk about a lot for boys, especially Black boys, and we should.
I will, however, speak on the commodification of Black bodies within these white households because my own personal experience growing up, I struggled with being commodified and fetishized within my family household and outside of my family household. Adultification happens when Black children are looked at and treated as adults. This looks like assuming Black girls are more sexually promiscuous and responsible for sexual harm that may happen to them. Black boys are also looked at as more mature sexual beings, as well as capable of more violent criminal behavior. Fetishization is reducing Black children to certain characteristics and is profoundly dehumanizing. We see this with people's obsessions with mixed babies or certain types of hair. We also see this with Black boys and the fetishization of their bodies as sexual objects. Objectification happens when a child's humanity is stripped away and they are treated as an object. Commodification happens when the child has been objectified and then that object is now turned into a product to sell in capitalist markets as a commodity. These projections do not stand alone. There are intersections and they build on each other. I think that it kind of looks like this. Adultification is kind of the overarching projection, and I believe that that flows into the objectification, which then flows out into the fetishization and commodification. Commodification and fetishization can come together when you see things like sex trafficking and for-profit adoptions. If you are fetishizing someone or looking at them as a commodity, you have already started the objectification process. The adultification comes in as the overarching projection when commodification, objectifying, and fetishization is focused on children. There are intersections on how these present depending on the gender identity of the child, and there are additional traumas, pressures, and harms when that child is part of the LGBTQI community, particularly transgender. Adultification, fetishization, and commodification of Black children's bodies can happen in households whether they are white or Black, but the childhood trauma looks different when the pressure and stereotypical expectation is being reinforced, not by people who look like you or who represent you, but again, by the colonizer, the oppressor, the slave master. I will never forget this experience I had. I can play it in my head over and over visually like a movie. My white father is driving. My white mother is in the passenger side. And my adopted baby brother, who is Indigenous Cherokee, is in the back seat next to me. Yes, my parents adopted a Black girl and a Indigenous brown boy. We were on our way to church. We had just left our 2-story, 4-bedroom house on 60 acres that my white adopted father's family owned. Yes, I grew up in material privilege. I bring that up to be transparent and give full context to my anecdotal stories. My parents had been allowing me to try different extracurricular activities to see what I might enjoy. And I really enjoyed dance. So ballet classes was one of the first things that I tried. I was like 6 or 7. I was a pretty high maintenance student, and I was maybe kind of aware of that as a kid, but kind of didn't care. I was 6 or 7 and I was really enjoying dance. So at the end of the season, of course, like any class, we did a big performance for all of our parents. My class remade some stupid Princess and Wolf story, and I was really excited because I got to be the wolf. I got this amazing like Tina Turner wig. It was like black and gray and white and like spiky and big. I mean, and it was the 90s, and I was definitely going to be a punk kid. So when my parents came to the class performance, obviously it was an audience of 99% white people, and the performance had me and 7 other white girls in little pink tutus, and I was in a gray tutu with a big, giant, messy, punky Tina Turner wig. I loved it, by the way. I loved it. I did not see anything wrong with it. I did not want to wear a pink tutu. I still don't. I don't like pink. Plus, like, outside of ballet class, once I could start dressing myself, I was a huge tomboy and wore nothing but boys' clothes. So imagine, there it is, all the parents, Princess and the Wolf. Wolf comes out, cute little me. And for my racist, narcissistic white mother, this was not a good look. So she pulled me out of the class and never let me go to a dance class again. She never asked me, did you mind being the wolf? Did you like being the wolf? I was pretty fucking devastated to be taken out of dance class, and at the time she never gave me a very good reason why. And when she finally did, she said it was because she thought the teacher was racist, but it wasn't about the teacher being racist. It was about how it made her look to everybody else in the audience. I also realized later it was because dance would require that my hips move, and my adopted white mother's #1 job was to make sure that I wasn't a slut or a stripper.
Here comes the whore.
Actually, now that I'm telling this story, I'm realizing that when I was in 8th grade and I was doing cheerleading, my parents actually did call me a stripper. Okay, so like Back to the original story. I'm in the car with my parents on my way to church, and my parents keep asking me if I would be interested in trying any sports like soccer or basketball or baseball. And I keep responding back with childlike inquisitive questions saying, why can't I just go back to dance class? So we're going back and forth in the car. My adopted white mom keeps bringing up sports. I keep bringing up dance. And I remember this so clearly because we're passing the last street before we come to the stoplight to get on the main street from our house. And my white mother turns around and looks at me in the seat right behind her. She puts her right hand gently on my knee, looks me in the eye, and says, I don't think dance is your God-given talent. See, God gives us talents, and Black people get one of three. They can either sing, dance, or play sports. And then she laughed and continued referencing my past attempts at singing at school functions and church performances and says, and we all know you can't sing, so maybe you should just try sports. Your father used to play basketball. He even got a scholarship. Maybe you could get a college scholarship. And that was that. I played basketball for the next 10 years. Never got to go back to dance class. I was expected, not just by my immediate family, but also by my very large white extended family, to be the next WNBA star. And that pressure was put on me at 8. I tried to quit my senior year, and my white adopted father got a group of all of my white uncles and cousins, and they had an intervention where they said, I can't quit basketball because I'm supposed to go to the WNBA. And they pressured me into playing one more year. A lot of my family wasn't just devastated, they were enraged when I declined to speak to college recruiters during my senior year. I did not want to play basketball in college. I had 2 bad knees that had to be wrapped before I did any sort of physical activity, and before every game that year, I took 8 500 strength Tylenol before and after the game to get through. I also didn't need a scholarship. My parents were plenty wealthy and probably could have paid for my college education cash. So actually, thank God for my white high school sweetheart that married me and allowed me to get the fuck out of my house. The abusive racial dynamics become even more apparent when you look at white parents are guardians of Black children from low-income or foster care households. Obtuse, habitual neglect is the only way that I can really describe it. If you can imagine having the memory of being forcibly taken from your parents, whether those parents were considered abusers by the state or not, having the memory of being ripped away from your parents, no matter what the family situation is, the trauma from being forcibly ripped away from your parents by the state is not worth whatever we are trying to do to protect these children. The trauma of taking the child out of the home is child abuse, life-altering child abuse. Foster care and CPS are some of the most egregious and abhorrent structures created by white women and male politicians to reinforce racial and patriarchal hierarchies within the capitalist system. We are going to get into the history of the state stealing children in the next chapter. We're going to get into more detail about how these systems were created and how they are still existing in this video a little bit later. And I want to emphasize that the majority of white women in America are really only interested in reinforcing their position within the social hierarchical structure, which means no matter what goodness may come out of their mouth or how giving and generous and selfless they may seem, a majority of them are going to have an underlining, possibly even subconscious intention about receiving accolades and praise for their work. And their work is not motivated or incentivized by actually helping whatever marginalized community that they are working with. Unfortunately, because white women in the social hierarchical system within America sit right below white cis men, I think collectively there has been a complex created around possibly being number 2 in the hierarchical system. When you are number 2, you can only keep your power or gain more power by either taking down the structure at the top or reinforcing the hierarchy structures below you. Personally, I don't think it's in white women's best interest to actually get to the top and try to take white cis men out of the top, because they're taking the blunt of all the fucking shit right now. And we're gonna get more into that in my next video essay that's gonna be more specifically just on white women and how maybe they actually aren't number 2 in the hierarchical system. What? Stay tuned. I'm just saying, if you wanted to stay at the top of a fascist, racist, sexist, patriarchal system and do the least amount of work, would you not want to convince society that most of this shit is being done by white men? If you take capitalism out of the feminist movement, it looks a lot different. And I know some of the feminists, particularly white feminists, may have a few opinions about that. Just stay with me. I'm just saying. We're gonna get next video. One concept to keep in mind as we go through this video is that the way that the family structure is actually set up within America is set up to replicate capitalism, is to set up to start the pre-programming of the children and to reinforce the programming of the parental units about how the capitalist state structure works outside the home. Think of the parental units more like the police of the home.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad 'cause I'm brown.
More like the unconsented authoritarian figure. Everything about the traditional American family, the nuclear family, from the gender roles to authority to consent to the actual family structure, is a replication of the capitalist system. If you think about what values of a traditional nuclear American family home are, they are things that reinforce capitalism. And blind consent to authority. Like a work first mentality. Like you can only enjoy pleasure after you work. You know, like do your homework and then you can play, you know? Like you have to do your chores before you get to like explore as a child. Whenever your parents told you things like, because I told you so, that was just programming you to have blind consent to authoritarian figures. The lack of sexual education and sexual repression, as well as religion, which we're gonna kind of touch on, but not fully get into in this video, causes repression and shame. These things are also carried out into larger society because this is how capitalism needs you to feel so that you're not as focused on liberating yourself through sexual expression, and so that you maintain gender roles and the patriarchy. Oftentimes within these family structures, you will hear things like, I just want the kid to be able to explore and figure out who they are, be themselves. But when the parents say that, they really want the kids to be able to do that within the box, framework, time, structure, setting that the parents have set. And oftentimes parents, they like to live vicariously through that child, you know? It's a lot of like, you can be yourself as long as it like fits in this box. And that is absolutely replicated in capitalist society. It's part of one of the contradictions of what we are told. Be yourself, express yourself, find out who you are. But it's only find out who you are through our capitalist tool. Find out who you are by being the best entrepreneur. Find out who you are in the box of capitalism that we've created for you. We start being trained that punishment and violence is appropriate to reinforce rules or the law within a household growing up. Losing your phone, losing privileges, not being able to leave your house, getting spanked. These are all things that are smaller child versions, replications of how the police is going to treat us in everyday society. And your parents prepare you for that. It's not their fault. The system told them to do it. Punishment and violence is used as a way to reinforce conformity with the structure and system. So you will work for capitalism, or so you will work for the family. And if you work for the family as a child, then you do work for capitalism because it makes it easier to do the capitalism as parental figures. It also communicates that punishment and violence by the enforcers can be done for some things that you may do bad, but also can be done for no reason at all. Now, as white kids with white parents, you are still going to suffer some of those systematic structures like patriarchy and organized religion, but adding in racism as well as how patriarchy intersects with racism within your family structure, again, looks much different for Black children with white parents. What happens is it reinforced narratives like Black people aren't valuable except for what can be commodified by their body, that white women are more valuable than women of color, that white people are entitled to Black people's bodies, and really that Black lives don't matter. So when those structures get recreated and reinforced in the microcosm of an interracial household with white parents, it looks a lot like what we're about to cover in this video.